My name is Emily Carter, and if there's one thing I've learned, it's that life doesn't go according to plan. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, where everyone knew everyone, and dreams often felt too big to fit in a place so small. I always thought my life would be simple: marriage, children, a stable career. But as I sit here reflecting on my journey, I realize that simplicity was never meant for me. It all started during my final year of college. I was 22, ambitious, and determined to make something of myself. My parents had always encouraged me to chase my dreams, and so I did, studying journalism with the hope of one day becoming a writer who could touch people's hearts. Writing wasn't just something I did, it was the way I understood the world. Words helped me make sense of pain, joy, loss, and love. Back then, I didn't have much. A tiny dorm room, a part-time job at a cafe, and a heart full of hope. My best friend, Sarah, often reminded me that I was a dreamer, and maybe she was right. Dreamers, after all, don't always live in reality. Still, I believed that dreams were what kept us alive. After graduation, I moved to Chicago. The city was intimidating at first, its tall buildings, noisy streets, and endless crowds. But it also felt like freedom. I rented a small apartment on the third floor of an old brick building. The walls were thin, the heat never worked properly, and the neighborhood wasn't the best, but to me, it was everything. I worked for a small local newspaper. The pay was low, the deadlines were brutal, and most of my assignments were about things like restaurant reviews or neighborhood events. Still, I poured my heart into every article. I told myself that one day, I'd write stories that mattered. Stories that changed lives. Then came the moment that shifted everything. One cold evening, I was assigned to cover a community fundraiser at a local library. It wasn't exactly the glamorous assignment I had hoped for, but I went anyway. That night, I met Daniel Miller. He was sitting at one of the tables, quietly reading a book while the event buzzed around him. He wasn't part of the crowd, and maybe that's why I noticed him. He looked out of place, calm in a world that never stopped moving. I don't know what it was about him, but something drew me in. I introduced myself, and we talked for nearly an hour. He wasn't flashy or trying to impress me. He was genuine, thoughtful, and surprisingly easy to talk to. By the end of the night, I knew I wanted to see him again. That was the beginning of a friendship that grew into something deeper. Daniel was different from anyone I had ever known. He was a teacher at a local high school, passionate about literature and helping young people find their voice. His quiet strength balanced my restless energy. Over time, we built something real. It wasn't perfect, we argued about silly things, we worried about money, we faced setbacks, but none of it mattered. What mattered was the way we always came back to each other. Years passed, and life threw its share of challenges our way. I lost my job at the paper when it shut down. Daniel struggled when his school faced budget cuts. We had to learn to lean on each other, even when it was hard. There were moments I thought we wouldn't make it, but love has a way of teaching you patience, humility, and resilience. One of the hardest seasons of my life was when my mother became ill. I had to spend months traveling back and forth between Chicago and Ohio. Daniel was my anchor during those days, reminding me that I wasn't alone, even when grief felt unbearable. In those quiet nights, sitting beside my mother's bed, I began to understand something. Whatever the world throws at you, whatever pain or loss you endure, what truly matters is the love you hold on to. The rest, the struggles, the doubts, the failures, none of it defines you. Love does. When my mother passed, I thought I'd never feel whole again. But Daniel stood beside me, holding my hand through the storm. Slowly, with time, I began to heal. Years later, I found myself looking back on everything we had gone through. The highs, the lows, the laughter, the tears. And in that moment, I realized, whatever it was, whatever hardships, whatever failures, whatever fears, it didn't matter. What mattered was the life we had built together, the love that carried us, and the lessons we had learned. Today, I write not for newspapers, but for myself and for others who need to hear stories like mine. Stories that remind us that life is never perfect, but it is always worth living. Daniel and I still live in our small Chicago apartment, though now it feels like a palace because it's filled with memories. And as I sit by the window, watching the sun set over the city, I whisper to myself, whatever it was, it didn't matter. Because what matters is here, in this moment, in the love that has carried me through it all.